Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey Wells, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. We have such amazing guests with us today. We're going to be talking medical devices, innovation, training, and support to reach today's digital patients, brought to you by One Touch Telehealth. So happy to have on the show. We have three amazing guests today. First, we have Sara Burdak, who's the Chief Audiologist with Starkey Hearing Technologies. She's responsible for developing and aligning Starkey's global strategy as it relates to education, training, the Department of Veteran Affairs, customer, student, and industry relationships. We have Michael Wahlster, who's the CEO and General Counsel of Impact Applications, who's changing the world in concussions. He's been an attorney in large law firms, founded and owned his own law firm 10 years prior to being with Impact Applications. And then we have Justin Ross, who's the Chief Technology Officer at MedLogix, where he manages product development, quality, and regulatory for the Ophthalmic company. We're going to talk today a little bit. First, thank you guys all for joining. So happy to have you all on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. Well, so we want to talk, there's kind of this back and forth on medical devices now. Is it hardware? Is it software? Is it equipment? And the industry is really changing with the customer and or patient changing of wanting more direct access to companies like you guys. And so I want to talk a little bit whether you're, selling your medical devices directly to the customer, where you're settling it to physician offices, through distributors, things like that. I really want to set the table for how the industry has changed. But before I do that, I know your short intros don't do you justice. So I want to really quickly just go around the table and have you guys just, in relation to this podcast, really just give us a quick of what your company's doing in the medical device space, how that's kind of changed for you. So Sara, let's start with you. You're in an industry that has historically in the hearing aid space not been really sexy. I think you'll agree when I label it sexy. And now you have all these patients across all different demographics. It's not just the baby boomers that have hearing aids. Tell us a little bit about where you guys are in that journey and what you're doing from the Starkey perspective.
It's been a bit of a long journey. Starkey has been in business since 1967, but that entire time our mission has been hearing is our concern. So you can imagine we have 6,000 employees. We do business in 100 global markets. You're dead on that we have to always be thinking about what's next. How do we get over the stigma of selling a device that most people don't want to wear?
Right.
And that's one of our biggest challenges. Most people wait a really long time to get a hearing aid if they need one, even when they know they can benefit from one. So 2 years ago, we started down this completely unique journey, and we said we have to reinvent the hearing aid. We have to look at a multifunction, multi-purpose device that will be something that people want to wear. So in addition to it being an amazing hearing aid, it is the first and only technology that has built-in integrated sensors, and we're using AI so that we can look at activity tracking. We can look at social engagement scores. We have tools like fall detection and alerts that would go out to a loved one. So by creating all of this additional value and having it in one device on the ear, which is the most accurate way to track some of these things, we now have a amazingly cool technology that even people who don't have a hearing loss are coming up to us saying, we want one. How do we get one of those? So it's been a complete change in revolutionizing the way people are even thinking about hearing aids. It's no longer this old frumpy device that maybe somebody remembers their grandparent having.
Right. And I have a ton of questions. I'm going to come back to my questions for you. But Michael, you went from being in a law firm to jumping on board with Impact, and you guys are really changing. When we think of, you know, the concussion industry, it was typically go into the ER, you know, get your MRI, see if you have a concussion. Tell everybody a little bit of how you guys have made this more virtual and the demographics that you guys serve.
Yeah, the old school thinking, very similar to, you know, the Starkey experience. Concussion was always thought of as something to be avoided, took you out of activity. You know, the old 2-finger test, what day of the week is it, all those kinds of things, which is complete nonsense. But that's what people thought about when they thought about concussion for years. So, you know, your intro was right on the mark with us. We are software and a medical device. We're a medical device that happens to be software. And so that industry, as well as the understanding of concussion, has changed pretty dramatically in the last 6-7 years, particularly since I joined the company. So, you know, looking at objective ways to measure a patient who's suspected at having a concussion, or managing a patient who we know has a concussion, has changed, not only in the methodology, using objective medical devices like ours, but also in who's doing those assessments. So, you know, when I joined the company several years ago, it's primarily just physicians, PhD neuropsychologists, physicians, sports medicine doctors. As medical device has changed, regulators have looked at access as an issue, cost concerns in healthcare, and patient demand for just access to care quickly and easily. Right. We've moved our medical devices along that track. So, you know, we used to be a very different medical device and a one-trick pony. We now have 3 medical devices, an app, free app that connects test takers to healthcare providers. And we do a lot more education than we've ever done before, because most of it was black box, very simple, really couldn't get any kind of management unless you were directly connected to a healthcare provider, and that was usually someone pretty far up the chain. So changes in medical device, changes in regulatory, our technology, as well as patient demands and cost measures have really changed the industry.
Awesome. So we have our ear, we have our head, and now we're going to move over to the eye side. So Justin, tell us a little bit. You guys are in a bunch of different countries. You're, you know, not only working with physician groups and hospitals and distributors. How has your industry really changed, and all the kind of innovation you guys have with your devices?
Well, we've been around since 1992, and we've been traditionally in LASIK and the donor tissue markets, but recently we've entered into the cataract removal market, and we sell into over 70 countries, like you said. So we've seen technology move more to high-tech devices. We are, with our cataract device, we're challenging a 50-year-old technology where mechanical ultrasound is used to remove the cataract, and that's a lot of energy to enter into a small and delicate organ, and we're doing the things quite a bit differently. And so we're challenging the status quo by doing that, but we're also seeing a lot better clinical outcomes. And so we see huge benefit with our technology, but we're entering into a market that has had a stronghold on it for some time. So we look forward to entering into FDA clinical trials first quarter of next year, and we see nothing but success for our future.
That's awesome. So I want to talk, we talked a lot about kind of this new, it's a medical device, it's hardware, plus you have the kind of complementary software. Do we think that's being driven by patients really expecting more you know, we've talked about, I used the word sexy earlier. We've talked about some industries that weren't historically, you know, sexy. And we've complemented some of these, especially Sarah and Michael, with some software that has made it more accessible at home, that has made it more accessible for caregivers, for patients to kind of manage their care, but also given some bells and whistles to pull down some of the stigmas associated with that. So Sarah, you guys rolled out a new app that has a lot of kind of the bells and whistles. Walk me through a little bit of when you guys kind of looked at the industry. You talked about this a little bit earlier. How did you come to, hey, we've got to not just make it about hearing, but kind of put some bells and whistles around that ecosystem and really make it beyond just the hearing aid and complement that with software? Was that from patient feedback? Was that you guys kind of betting on the future of medical devices? Tell me kind of how you guys got there.
There was a lot involved in that, and I love the fact that you're using the language of an ecosystem, because we have software that programs the hearing aids. We have the software on the hearing aids, the sensor integration on the devices. We have an app, and we have accessories, because the whole idea is that we're helping an individual hear better and live better in any environment or situation that they're in.
Right.
So in order to do that, we started looking specifically at the relations of hearing loss to other medical comorbidities. And it's quite stunning. And so when you think about hearing loss and impact then of social isolation and loneliness, and then maybe because of that, you have less activity. You're not getting up and out and moving as much as you might have before. Because of that, you're limiting your social engagement. We started thinking of this whole system as really a healthable. So a hearing healthable device, which was really unique, because when we started thinking about the facts that if you wear a hearing aid, it can help reduce the progression of dementia by as much as 75%. It can reduce your risk of falls. It can reduce your risk of even things like cardiovascular disease. We wanted to say, my gosh, in this population of people wearing our product, the average age of the first-time hearing aid user is still about 69, 70 years old. Do we want them to have something on their wrist, something around their neck? You know, all of these inputs and sleep monitoring machines and all of these things. Or do we want them to have one device with an app that efficiently and easily, it has to be very user-friendly, serves all of this up to them?
Right.
But importantly, then we said, what else can we do? So we know that this population tends to be the group, if you look at just what we know about baby boomers, they tend to do more high-end travel. So why not add in a language translator right in the ear? So these devices translate 27 different languages.
That's cool. They
have voice-to-text transcription. We're trying to make sure that we're thinking holistically, accommodating for the fun features, but also accessibility and mobility with tap and gesture controls on the hearing devices, and just thinking about a whole seamless system or ecosystem that allows people to, you know, hear better and live better wherever they are and whatever they're doing.
That's really cool. And Michael, the one thing that I really thought was cool was, you know, what you guys are doing with your apps on the concussion side, especially on the pediatrics, and that shift, as you said earlier, of not just being the physicians, but also putting some of that testing on other folks in the ecosystem of healthcare as well as parents. Can you tell us a little bit on the software side from the pediatrics and kind of what you guys have been doing in that regard?
Sure. So for years, if there was any concussion baseline testing done at all, It was usually done in a group setting, in a controlled environment in a school. Many schools did not have the infrastructure to do that, or the personnel. So oftentimes we would talk to large school districts, even state programs, who would want to bring our software into that particular organization, but they just didn't have the infrastructure, or even large community groups, your local soccer league, those kinds of things. There's no, so we had that challenge. So what we started to look at, very similar, to other folks in adjacent industries, was how do we get this testing onto a platform that's a little bit easier to get at and take the logistical challenge out of it. So we did that in two ways. A lot of research involved, a lot of FDA, Health Canada, TGA, were regulatorily cleared all over the world. So it takes a long time for us to do this, but we needed to move to tablets or enabling test takers to get at our baseline testing at home. And so just last year, the FDA cleared us, as did Health Canada and our CE mark and everything, to start delivering baseline testing at home. Some of our baseline testing is actually administered on a tablet as well, which is much easier for the healthcare provider or the test administrator in a school to simply provide the tablet and off we go. So you're not looking for a computer lab. It doesn't take a long time. But the home-based testing was a huge development for us. We're going to where the patients are, and that's the ecosystem part again, to kind of continue the theme in the last discussion. Our ecosystem for years stopped at the healthcare provider.
Yeah.
All the information was kept at the healthcare provider. The patient just interacted with the medical device, and then that was it. And so that's why the app, where you can self-report symptoms, you can send your scores to a different healthcare provider, you can find a healthcare provider, as well as the ability to take some of this testing at home. We're also moving into telemedicine as well. Many of our large health systems, particularly in North America, are starting to not only do baseline testing, but also manage the injury with post-injury testing on a telemedicine platform. So the world's changing. It's all about access and delivery and speed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, access and delivery. And I want to shift gears a little bit with you, Justin, as you guys have more, true to fashion, medical device and equipment and, hospitals, facilities, things like that. As we move into this world of, supporting all these different countries, as we look at, being more digital customers, digital patients, digital doctors, digital health systems, I want to talk about the training aspect. And from your side, Justin, I want to talk about, how has training changed? How has training changed of the actual equipment for the physicians and the folks using the equipment? And how has training changed from a sales perspective when you're out, in this? I mean, is that gone more digital? How have you, as a CTO, kind of looked at supporting that, and not only supporting that, but supporting that, from the U.S. globally? How has that changed, and where do you see that headed?
Well, training has traditionally been through direct support, boots on the ground, which is extremely expensive and hard to find resources for in all of the countries that we have distributorships in. So we have tried to move more towards video conferencing, meeting at certain conventions, but we see that the market is changing. So in the last decade, the average age of a cataract patient has gone down 10 years. And so we're looking at more of a long-term clinical benefit to the patient. And the only way in doing that is to educate and re-educate the surgeons who use our products. Our products are different than what's traditionally used. And so that also entails more education to the surgeon, to the end user. It also entails more education to the patient. The more the patient knows, the more they're able to ask questions that will give them the treatment that better suits them. With younger patients, it's essential that the health of the eye after surgery is much better than what's traditionally been seen. And the health of the eye correlates specifically to what's called endothelial cells. And phacoemulsification, which is the traditional method used to extract cataracts, tends to damage a high percentage of endothelial cells. In fact, in some cases, it can be up to 35 to 40% endothelial cell loss. In our recent study, it was 2.86% average endothelial cell loss. So we're trying to accommodate the market where the trends are that the younger patients are coming into the cataract surgeon's office. And so that entails a whole different environment in terms of training. So we're looking at more of the telehealth option as being a viable option for us because it's more direct. It allows for us to answer those questions more immediately and allows for more early adopters to use our new technology. And that's truly the only way that we're going to get early adopters with new technology, where it's been 50-year-old technology that has had a strong hold on the market. For these early adopters, the only way that they're comfortable with the products is if they can get their questions answered within minutes, not days. Right. So that's what we see.
So that brings up a good point. And as we do this theme of, kind of the ecosystem, I want to go quickly around how has training for your company changed, right? So historically, you guys were probably all more focused on training physician groups, training practices, training hospitals. Sarah, in your case, long-term care, things like that. How has that changed? Has that, obviously you're now having to train direct to patient. You're having to still train your healthcare kind of ecosystem. Has that put more emphasis and resources in your training departments? Has that made it shift to looking at, less maybe paper materials, more digital, more videos? Just if we could just quickly go around, Michael, we'll start with you. How has that changed from your standpoint on training for you guys?
Dramatically. We went completely digital 2 years ago at the healthcare training level as well as the consumer level. So now we're reaching out. Video on demand is our primary offering with the medical community and accreditation programs. That's gone exceedingly well for us. And, to Justin's point, it's become a profit center, not a cost center.
Yeah.
for a whole host of reasons. But we've also moved into the test taker or the consumer side. So we have an Alexa skill, that's on the flash briefing for our at-home users. We have ebooks in Amazon, Concussion 101, easily downloaded for free. Our social presence has increased dramatically, particularly over the last 2 years. So we're educating people on multiple fronts and at both ends of the spectrum. So, product education and condition education for the healthcare side, basic, concussion information, access information, testing information for the consumer side, and then business information for the folks who aren't in either of those groups. These are the billing people, the practice managers, the reimbursement folks. That's a big piece of the education aspect anymore, because if you can't get reimbursed to use the device, you're not going to use it.
It's all about the money, right? And Sarah, quickly from your standpoint, how has it training changed for you guys?
I would agree. It's had a massive shift. We still do probably 50-50 from face-to-face training. And that's because from the professional perspective, we're providing all of their continuing education, and there's a lot of hands-on.
Yeah.
So in the professional space, they have to be able to take impressions. They have to be able to make sure they can modify and fit the hearing aids. But with that, within the last, I'll say 2 years, the other 50% we're doing online. So we do a ton of training online, again, still offering continuing ed for that. One of the things that we've really, really had to look at, though, is what tools do we have in the app? What we hear so often in healthcare is it's becoming about the efficiency of it all rather than the patient experience. So we have to then take it on ourselves to say, how can we help supplement the best possible patient experience?
Yep.
So on our websites within the app for the patients, we have a lot of videos. We have quick snippets of how to take care of this, clean and care for it, how to use the app, anything that you would expect when you're getting a new product. But we've taken it to the next level more recently because a hearing aid doesn't help somebody if it's not worn and working.
Right.
So they're designed to be worn all day, every day. Hearing aids are around sweat and hairspray and earwax and all of these things. So we've implemented a tool right through the app that does a full self-check of the hearing aid for the patient. So they're going to know that it's working appropriately. We have a full telehealth implementation that's called Hearing Care Anywhere, so that if they're out and they're in an environment and they're not hearing well, they can ask for assistance right at that point in time. So again, we're just trying to make sure that we're addressing this expectation of digital and digital convenience at every single touch point along the way, not only for the professional, but importantly for their patient. Right. We're in a position, like many of the other folks here, that our job has to be to train the professional to the best of their ability so that they can fit their patient and serve them to the best of their ability.
Great. And then Justin, I know you started this, but where's training as we look at the future, as we look at 2020, what's kind of on the roadmap for you guys? Where are you guys headed as you've got these new products going into clinical trials? Are you looking at that differently than you might in the past, or how does that look for you guys?
Very much so. So traditionally with our LASIK products, we were able to certify the end user at a one-time training because it's a traditional device that they may have gone to school with. With this cataract technology, we're looking more at continuing education and recurring training, but also the direct ability to answer their questions within minutes. That's really the only way we're going to be able to tailor our training to each individual user. And that's essential, again, for early adopters of new technology. They need to know what to do at a moment's notice. And that's how we're planning on doing it, is with telehealth type communication.
I guess especially if they're in surgery, right? They don't have time for you to respond to their email.
100%.
Okay, so my favorite question to close the podcast, what is keeping you up as a healthcare executive? What are the two things that are keeping you up at night? And so yeah, just go around. I always love to hear kind of the quick two things. And we always keep it healthcare. So your kids, husbands, wives, that doesn't count. So we'll start with you, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it's the implications of if nothing changes and we continue down this path of untreated hearing loss, the cost and the healthcare aspects of that are extraordinary.
Right.
Because of the medical conditions that I spoke about. So it's imperative to me that we have this really global education campaign, because hearing loss, unbelievably, hearing loss is the third most prevalent chronic condition in the world. Wow. I manage our government services business. Tinnitus and hearing loss are the number 1 and 2 service-related issues as well. So I think the education piece, how do we move this needle
right
to make an impact so people decide not to wait on average 7 to 10 years before taking action to do something about their hearing problem.
Awesome. And Justin, you?
You know, the two things really keep me up at night. One's assumptions, and the other is the reluctance to change. Cataract surgery is one of the top 10 surgeries performed around the world. And for the globe to see the benefits from our products, there needs to be less assumptions and less reluctance to change. And we plan on doing that again through education and getting through to the end user and convincing them of our products through clinical outcomes.
Michael?
Yeah, really just a couple things, both kind of regulatory related, external, the things you can't control. So the medical device directive in Europe seems to be, I'll be generous and say, without a rudder. The Europeans love to talk about the regulation and figure out how to do it later. For actual medical device companies, that is unnerving, to say the least. And then in the US and North America, the lack of regulatory oversight. So the regulators have been quick and decisive to regulate our space, but then leave the space and actually fail to police the market. So kind of along the lines of the general education that's been talked about in the public, there's a lot of misinformation about concussion. There's a lot of device companies, I use that term pretty loosely, but there's some companies out there making outrageous claims that are dangerous. And the regulators seem to be more focused on reviewing submissions than actually policing the market. So hopefully that changes soon.
I wasn't going to make any lawyer jokes, Michael, but of course your two had to be legal related.
Well, medical device, I mean, I think everyone on the podcast knows you go through a lot of expense. We have over 500 plus research articles on our products.
Yeah, it's insane.
There's a lot of time and money spent on the regulatory process. And when you get through it, only to turn around and see 10 other companies who haven't, they're making crazy claims and putting the public at risk, that's quite frustrating.
Yeah, I'm just messing with you, Michael. It wasn't going to be a good podcast without a lawyer joke with a lawyer on. I mean, come on. Come on. Awesome. So to close out this podcast, I want to go around and you guys have all been amazing guests. You guys are all changing healthcare, doing amazing things. Tell everybody where they can find you. Justin, where can everybody follow your guys' journey from that perspective?
Please go to our website, www.mlogix.com or medlogix.com, and we post a lot of surgical video and we try to educate from there.
Cool. Sarah?
StarkeyPro.com. On Twitter, it's at Starkey Hearing, or myself at Sara Burdak.
Awesome. Michael?
ImpactTest.com for the main site. We're on all social platforms. I'm at Michael Wahlster on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Awesome. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much. This roundtable has been so much fun. We will all continue to watch your journey. This closes the show. This is the Executive Innovation Podcast. Feel free, if you have any questions for today's guest, feel free to submit those to us. Please tag any of our guests in the show if you have direct questions for them on all social media. Feel free to rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly podcast. Thanks, everybody, so much for being on the show. It has been a true pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.